So today I have with me Steve Brown, vintage watch expert from Second Hand Horology. He's gonna show me some cool pieces that hopefully I've never seen before. Let's check it out. So what is it, your company, my friend, Steve?
So, Second Hand Horology is the name of my company.
Second Hand Horology. And what do you specialize in? Like, we specialize in Rolex, Patek, AP. What do you specialize in?
Not nearly as cool stuff as you guys do, but we specialize in vintage stuff, primarily American-made wristwatches, but we also do lots of Longines, we do lots of Omega, occasionally a Vacheron, Patek, you name it, but we really like to preserve pieces of history for people, right?
And
so more so than high-end value, we value really the preservation of history and passing on the history itself and the knowledge and the product to people.
awesome. I've never even heard of an American-made watch. I've
never
heard
heard-
of
oh.
Japanese and I've heard of Swiss-made.
Oh my goodness!
So-
we're in for a learning experience.
Show me, teach me what you
Well,
got in
I only
here.
got a couple with me today, but
This
we got-
box says it looks like you got a lot in here.
well, we don't. The goal is to leave Miami with it full, but right now it's not. We got a little bit of Swiss and American in here. Actually, it's interesting. So you've never heard of an American wristwatch. This is actually one of the first wristwatches ever made, and is actually made in America.
Can I take it out?
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is, wait, Elgin? I've heard of Elgin. I
Elgin.
didn't know. Elgin is how you say
Elgin,
it?
from Elgin, Illinois, which is actually right down the road from where we are from. So we're from the Chicago metro area, actually Rockford. We met in Elgin. Actually, my partner and I met in Elgin. But this is actually this piece comes from what's called the transitional era. So this was when they really weren't sure if wristwatches
Were a
going to
thing.
be a thing for men or not. So this is actually a men's watch. This is not a ladies' watch. It's an upper scale watch. You can tell by the enameling on the dial, the gilding. Pretty cool piece. That's from 1902. That's 121 years old.
Jesus.
And it runs and it keeps time.
This
accurately.
is
Pop open
crazy.
the back.
What do you mean pop open the back?
Oh yeah. So let's get her wound up so you can see the movement spin.
Can we do that again? Put it next to the mic. I love that. Listen to that crunch. How awesome.
All right, ready?
Oh, wow, that's cool. And then
Don't
it's
be
a
afraid.
stretch bracelet.
Yep. Don't be
Oh
afraid.
man, so this bracelet is like the Rolex, the rivet, the stretch rivet that they had
Yep.
back in the days.
Yep, very similar, very similar. So that's that could very well be the original bracelet for that watch. If you notice, it was actually fashioned around those lugs, which were soldered on. So those are wire lugs. So that is a watch from 1902, and that's how it would have been cased up. And you see
Wow.
it's actually running. If you notice all the inscription on the inside of it, it actually says 7 jewels, and it doesn't sound like a lot when we're used to, Omegas with 39 jewels and things like that today. But at one point in time, having a jewel in a watch was a big deal. So 7 jewel
Was unheard of.
in 1902 for a wrist was actually upper mid grade.
So the only time I've ever seen an Elgin, how you said it correctly. So the only time I've seen an Elgin was a client who left a huge pocket watch actually
Yes.
here for us to do that, and I started researching them, and if I'm not mistaken, I didn't know they were American. So I didn't do too much research, but from what I understood, they were probably the largest watch manufacturer until Rolex, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So
And then Rolex, they only made pocket watches back in the days, and then when they started wristwatches were only for women.
correct.
And then Rolex said, hey, I think it's going to get to a point where people don't use pocket watches anymore and only going to be wristwatches.
You got it.
So this kind of started that evolution of wristwatch.
Correct.
Nice.
Yep. So this would have been one of the first examples of a wristwatch that exists for the American market. And actually, Elgin, speaking of the Swiss watch industry, back during the World's Fair, I think in 1903, the Swiss came over and actually toured the Elgin facility, and they were floored. They were shocked by the production capabilities, how everything was uniform and everything made sense and flowed smoothly instead of having the whole one guy, one watch philosophy. And actually revolutionized the entire global manufacturing process for watchmaking.
Awesome. What does something like this run?
So that one's not incredibly expensive. It's about a $500-600 watch. It really is.
That's
in my
very
opinion,
cool.
It's probably worth more. It will be. 10 years ago, you could pick one of those up for about $100. Today, they bring $500 or $600. They're probably going to continue to appreciate because Well, they quit making them 120 years ago.
Amazing, amazing. What's a trench watch
It's
mean?
technically a trench watch. Yes, it is technically a trench
So
watch.
I've heard you use that term a couple times already. What does trench watch mean?
So a trench watch was actually, so this is how wristwatches actually came to be for men, right? So imagine it's World War One or the Revolutionary War, whatever. You're going into battle. You need to have, you know what time it is, so you know how to advance with the adjoining platoons, whatever the case may be. You jump down into a trench because you're under enemy fire, and your pocket watch crystal breaks and shatters, or you're down in the swamp and you get water inside of your watch. Well, guess what? You can't tell time anymore. So the trench watch is actually how wristwatches actually became to be for men. So as you can see, this would have been originally a sidewinder case, what we call a sidewinder, unlike a traditional pocket watch that winds from the top. The Zenith is another example of a sidewinder. This is a top winder, so this is a trench watch also. So they fashioned lugs to put on the watches so that men could wear them on their wrists, where they were less likely to take damage in the event of a battle, jumping down.
So on your wrist, it was safer than here?
Yes. Yep, absolutely.
Maybe that's back in those days, but not on my dad's wrist. My dad destroys watches.
Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's how that came to be. So that's
it makes sense. So when you jump in a puddle, you keep your hand out of the puddle, or if you're running, you just be cautious of where your hand is versus your pocket. You're slamming into things.
A lot of times your hand was on your rifle, right? So you're careful not to smash the end of your rifle into something. So you're more well protected.
So I wonder, is this at an angle so when you hold the rifle, it can be straight up? And you hold it upside down?
That's one of the things that they talk about. So nobody really knows exactly why they did this angle. This is actually called a Hampden 400. The speculation is possibly 4 holding arms, right? And actually, it would have been mounted on the inside of the wrist. So when you're in battle, because they also didn't really know where to put a wristwatch back in the day, too. So it's interesting because we have another watch in there that's actually called a Hamilton Contour. It was actually made to be worn in 3 different positions: as a driver's watch, on top of the wrist, and on the bottom of the watch, at the bottom of the wrist, and it has flexible lugs to accommodate all 3 positions.
Interesting. And I don't know if it's true or not. If you guys can let me know in the comments below. But I've heard that the reason that back in the day they had their watch on the inside of their hand is so when you had your rifle at hand and you say, okay, at this time we're firing, everybody was synchronized. Correct. And also if you were walking and you had the loom pointing towards the inside, it wouldn't illuminate for other people on the outside to see.
Correct.
So that is the reason why?
That is correct.
Oh, awesome,
and
awesome.
As you can tell, there's loom on that. So that's radium. That's from 1914.
Is it radioactive still?
I'm sure it is. I mean, I'm sure it is. They say it's got a half-life of like 10,000 years.
Does it still illuminate?
Only if you hit it with UV. So if you hit it with strong UV, it will glow.
That's so cool. That's such a cool watch.
And you can actually tell that's kind of seen some use in the field too, because I don't know if you noticed the staining on the back of it.
That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Oh man, so I just touched some World War I blood.
Yep, that's what we think it is.
How old was World War I? 80, 90 years ago? No.
So 19 America's involvement, I think, was 1911 to 1914. I could be wrong. I don't know exactly when we stopped, but we kept supporting the forces.
Wow. So it's over 100 years in.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm touching 100-year-old. Oh yeah, you could definitely see it's red on this side here. Touching 100-year-old war watch with blood on it.
Pretty wild to think about, isn't it?
That is very wild to think about it. What is this one?
So those are actually about $1,200 to $1,500. And they're getting more and more rare all the time, right? Because they only came with 2 different movements. They came with what's called a Molly Stark or a diadem. And as with every passing year, the parts supply dwindles, the movements dwindle, they get lost, right? So something like that is only going to increase in value historically as well as from a monetary standpoint.
This is so cool. I love this. I love the dial and the colors on it. I think it's a little too small for me to wear it on my wrist, but
you get used to it.
You get used to it?
As a Finnish guy, you get used to it, right? So when I used to wear watches that size all the time, right? So now when I put a watch like your Hulk on, I'm like, oh my God.
It's huge.
What do I do with this? It's intimidating almost.
And I don't know if you guys can catch this on camera, but one of the coolest things about when you opened up the box is just how loud these movements are. You hear them ticking, like really, really ticking.
Yeah.
It reminds me of
Especially these two.
So that's the two that I hear the most on them.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. This one's not too quiet either. That's a Postala. That's a doctor's military chronograph. Is that one running?
Yeah.
Couldn't remember if I wound that or not.
No,
That's
I hear
actually got 4 different tracks inside of it. It does so that's a tachometer, a telemeter, a pulsometer, and then we don't know. And I've asked many people in both the Chicago Watch Club and the Rockford Watch Club what the inside track is. We think it's breaths per minute, but we're not real sure. But the telemeter actually is a very interesting thing. Do you know what that is?
Nope, never heard of it.
So when you're in battle, right, and you want to know how far away the enemy is, and you hear boom in the distance, you hear artillery fire, or you see a flash. So you start your chronograph, right? Mm-hmm. And then when you hear the sound, you stop the chronograph. And the telemeter scale will actually tell you how far away the enemy is.
Oh, that's like counting the lightning with the thunder when you're a kid. It's like, oh, that one was really close. Those 2 seconds. Awesome, man.
Yeah, that's exactly what that is.
Super cool. So this is a trench watch as well?
No, it's not typically a trench watch. It's just a military old. It's a Landeron 39 movement. It's just an old World War II era doctor's military watch.
What makes a watch a trench watch?
It's typically the age. It has to be a certain age, but usually the big defining factor are the unusual lugs. So you can look at the lugs on this and you can tell the lugs were somewhat of an afterthought, both on this watch and on this watch. So typically you see a wire lug on a true trench watch. Hampden was really trying to refine it, and so they went with something that was more sturdy. So try to bend that. I mean, it's very strong. It's very durable.
I wouldn't try to bend it, but
no,
okay.
It's been through a war. You'll be
true. Good point. Hey, there's nothing I'm gonna do to this that hasn't been done before.
And the movement, actually, it's kind of interesting too. So, just like the Elgin that was very decorated on the inside, we didn't have display backs back then. There was no reason to show off the movement, right? So, what's really interesting is the finishing, the level of finishing, the detail, etc., is actually really nice
on this one.
Yeah. So I can show you if you want to see it.
You have to pop it off.
Yeah, of course. All the time. So.
I was even scared to take the strap off of just how
So. I might need to grab a knife for this. I come equipped.
Oh!
Case knife out.
Having a heart attack here just watching him do this. Oh, wow. That is really nice.
And you can wind it up if you want. Wind it up and watch it run. So, again, over 100 years old. No reason to...
Yeah, let me wind it in front of the camera one second.
Now, it probably takes a little bit more to get going than your modern watch, right?
I just gave it 2 spins and it started. Look at all that blood. World War I. Wow. It's actually like this. Beautiful. Okay.
Always a challenge.
Beautiful. Okay, so let me see. So I got...
There's no Richard Mule turd.
Got it there?
Yep.
Okay. All right, now, you said that pocket watches have the crown usually on the top, right?
Typically they do, yes.
So what is this? Because this doesn't look like a shape of a normal pocket watch.
That's a great question. That is a great question. So go ahead and pop that up there if you want. So that is, I wish I had the other one with me. We just sold it and shipped it to Australia. So this is also still from kind of that weird transitional era where they really weren't quite sure what to do with a watch, right? So the crown is at the top, but it is definitely not a pocket watch. So you can just wind it like this. This is called a Hamilton contour. And when we were talking earlier about the watches that were in 3 positions.
A contour because it has a contoured case.
Well, yeah. So you can wear it on the side of your wrist as a driver's watch, because back then it was really a big deal. They were very concerned about being able to see the time while they were driving for some reason. So they started mounting watches on the side of the wrist. So they can mount on the side of the wrist. They can wear it on the top of they called it the three-way watch, which I think today means something way different. But back then, it had a more innocent meaning, and it could be worn on top of the wrist.
On top, like this, on the side?
Yep, and then also, again, on the
bottom?
inside of the wrist, because that was still kind of in vogue for some reason, right? But if you notice, it's flexible lugs, and there aren't a lot of watches that are flexible lugged, and there's only really one model we know of that was made in America that actually has a top winding crown, and that is the Hamilton Contour.
That is super cool.
Very different.
So one thing that I always say about Richard Mille, that you mentioned Richard Mille, is that it's super, super hard to design a curved top case, center case, and the bottom case, and then have it watertight on top of it.
Correct.
So people take for granted how hard that contoured case is. These people were doing it in what year?
Oh, God, what's that? I think that's 1928. If
1928.
memory serves correctly. It's within a couple years of that, for sure.
A lot of people might be like, how would you not know where to wear the watch, inside, bottom, whatever? Think about it. Back in the days, this was probably glass. It's not sapphire, right? Or is this acrylic?
So a lot of times it was either a very rudimentary plastic or it was glass, yes.
But it was never sapphire back in the days. No. So it makes sense to wear the watch on the inside because as you're walking, you're not bumping into everybody. Absolutely. It's here against your side. Very, very cool piece. Very interesting piece. So this was, again, around that transitional era, around going pocket to...
Yep. So when this was produced, they were probably still producing more pocket watches than they were producing wristwatches at that time. I don't think we actually started to surpass wristwatch production, wrist versus pocket watch, till probably right before World War II. Then at that time, it was considered okay to wear a wristwatch.
Which is when where Rolex started taking over, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So who was bigger at the time, Elgin or Hampden? Hampden.
Hamilton. Elgin was by far. So we actually, being from the area, turns out there's an Elgin museum in Elgin, Illinois. The factory is no longer there, but we saw the 50 millionth Elgin ever made. So that was kind of cool. So they actually have it on display, and they made a whole series of these watches. And I think they made 1,000 of them, but they were made out of solid gold, and they came in just a huge silver case, and it was called the 50 millionth edition watch. But at the end of it all, I think there were around 67 million watches produced when they shut the factory down.
That's a lot. That's a lot of watches. A lot of watches. Let's see what else here. What is this here?
Oh my gosh.
Is this?
So that's definitely not. That is not an American market watch. That is actually a Swiss-made watch. It's actually a Sandoz. It's called a Sandoz Monsoon. So that's actually a triple calendar watch. That's actually a triple calendar watch, and if you notice, the date and day are actually in Portuguese. It's actually a watch that was made for the South American market, and none of them were marketed here or brought here. So we're kind of lucky to have that. Sandoz has kind of an interesting history. They were actually linked with LaColtra for a while. There were 3 different levels of Sandoz. They started manufacturing mid-level watches kind of wherever they could do it, and then they produced low-end watches in Asia, the China market, Malaysia market, and then they started producing the high-end version, which was called Sandoz Swiss. And if you notice, that one's actually a Swiss watch.
Very nice.
I actually got the crystal replaced on it. That's a very
And is this a dive watch because this large case like that?
It is not.
It's not?
not.
Oh, okay.
Nope, it is not. It does have water resistance, but it is not
dive
marketed
watch?
as a diver. Mm-mm.
It reminds me of the case style of the memo box that
Love the memo box.
that I've seen a couple of them now.
Super cool watch.
Very, very
Crystal
cool.
arm. Yeah. So that's an in-house Omega quartz watch. So when the quartz revolution, which actually turned into, you may be familiar with it, they called it the quartz crisis.
Yes, I've heard of that.
Because it almost killed the entire mechanical watch industry as a whole. So when Omega said, well, either we have to become a part of it or we have to shut down our factory, they did what Omega does, and they manufactured one of the best movements ever made, completely in-house. So this was a proprietary movement. This is a caliber 1310. When this watch came out, it was accurate to 5 seconds per month. So when we talk about watches, we'd always talk about, how many seconds per day, what's the accuracy rate, seconds per day. And even with the new Omega Spy rate that just came out, right? We talk about how efficient it is. And it's like, I think it's -0 + 1 second a day, or maybe it's the inverse of that, but it's a very, very accurate watch. This is 5 seconds per month. And at the time this was made, it was the second most accurate watch in the world, second only to the Omega Marine Master 1, which was accurate to 1 second per month. Now, a lot of people that are in the know later came out and said the accuracy on this watch was actually greater than 5 seconds per month, but it wasn't certified as by the COSC. So they didn't want it to actually cross the threshold of accuracy with the Master Mariner, which was considered a marine grade chronometer. So that's still to this day, outside of atomic regulated watches, like we have the Seiko with the picks up the UTC signal. Right?
I've never even heard of that.
No?
I've never seen that.
Oh,
Nope.
It's super crazy.
So I actually had a client. As you see here, my watches are never on time or date because
Mine are never on date.
I wear them more for fashion reasons and just for conversation and especially because we're in Miami and you kind of need a watch here to move around.
Right.
Let me see this little one here. This
Oh
one caught my attention earlier. I'm actually going to walk up to the camera on this one here. So that's actually, you were telling me, the second hand, right?
Yes.
It's a second hand connected to the pallet fork. Oh, look at that second hand. Beautiful piece. Very, very nice watch.
So this is pretty neat.
I was eyeing that one.
This is a pocket watch conversion, right? And if you've seen many of them, or if you've seen any of them at all, some people call them marriage watches. What it means is they marry a movement into a new case. This is technically not a marriage watch. And the reason I say that, this is the actual original case, right? The loop for the, pocket watches usually have the loop they hook a chain to keep it, right? That's been removed. Somebody did that and milled it off. And then they kept the original case to this watch. And somebody who was a very good silversmith put lugs onto this. But if you notice,
it has dual case backs.
Yes, that's a dust protector. And it's got a movement there. Oh, wow. But if you read that right there, it says Paris Grand Prix 1900, which refers to an award they won. So if you ever look at an old Longines box, it'll say most awarded watch in the world, and it has all these Grand Prix. These were timing competitions, right? So they won a timing competition. They won an award, basically, for making very accurate watches. This is Zenith, by the way, who's still around today, still makes a good watch. But this one actually dates from 1906. So they wore that, but they would engrave that into the back of all their original cases. And check out the movement. So it's nice and happy, keeping good time. It's accurate still to a couple seconds per day. But if you hear how loud that is, I don't know if your mic is picking that up, but that thing is loud. It's a monster.
Oh, sorry.
You're wearing it. You're sitting around and nobody's talking. You can hear it just going.
Let's put it here.
You definitely know your watch is running.
So the only other watch that I would say was loud that you would hear it while it's sitting down is this AP high frequency that we had that had 2 barrels on it.
Yeah, lots of power.
And certain AP tourbillons. I'll be in the car with the music off and you hear the watch ticking and I'm like, this is insane. It's unbelievable. I love it.
I bet that tourbillon sounds beautiful.
You can hear. I'll bring one else so you can see it. This is an assumption, but is this like advanced anti-retard movement?
Yep. Absolutely.
Oh, nice.
Yep, absolutely. That's exactly what that is. So when we get done servicing it, you'll notice it's pretty much dead center right now, and it's on time. But as if you found after you wore it that it needed to be adjusted, because sometimes heat, temperature, humidity, etc. Can really affect the way a watch runs, or if you start to get dirty, or maybe your mainspring starts to lose some of its strength, you need to adjust it to time your watch out, and that's exactly what it is.
Were these watches back in the days handmade, or they were like machines building them up?
So the plates were handmade, right? I'm sorry, not the plates. The plates were machine made, but everything was hand finished and hand assembled, much like today's higher end watches. But nothing went down a production line, kind of like what we know today, right?
Awesome.
So yeah, it was a lot of hand finishing on these, and those jewels, if you notice, they're huge in comparison to a modern jewel.
No, even the balance wheel's huge. Everything is so much bigger because I guess you don't have the technology to make it that small.
No, not at all. No, it was guys and gals in a factory working while there was daylight. You know, for the most part, actually the whole Swiss watch industry, they were limited heavily through the years by daylight. So the whole cottage Swiss watch industry really truly was people building watches in cottages. So you might, if you're in that industry, you might make one part. You might make mainsprings. Your neighbor might make balance wheels. And that's what the cottage industry actually refers to when they talk about the whole old industry. But yeah, it's kind of neat to hang
look
on to
at
something like that.
even the pallet fork, and
Oh yeah,
it's
you can see
so
it running
cool.
just like a champ.
So this, would you adjust it yourself, or you would have to take it to a watchmaker? Like back in the days, you would just open up your case and slide that thing manually by your hand?
It's always recommended not to. They tried to deter people from it. Some people would try to do that, and sometimes they would severely screw things up, or accidentally. What happened more often than not is somebody would. These things can be quite tight. The adjustments can be quite tight sometimes. So people would have like a pocket knife or something, and they would do it, and they would slip and then hit the balance wheel.
And mess everything
Now you're
up.
broken because there's no shock protection, there's no Inca block, there's nothing of that nature, no Dia-Shock. Like, if you notice, there's no shock protection on that. So if you drop that watch, it's done. You got to well, it's not done. We can put a new balance in it. We can put a new balance in it. But the dial is actually kind of cool too. So the dial is actually a piece that was made. We think, and if you notice, if you hold it at an angle, you can see the waviness in the paint. So that's something that very, very old dial enamel does sometimes. So we do believe that's probably quite an old original dial. And it was actually made for the Monte Carlo Casino in Monaco.
I've been there.
Have you?
Yes, I have. So I just saw a beautiful collection of watches, brands that I've never even heard of before, brands that I have heard of like Omega, and models I've never seen before. Like this Zenith here, I've heard of Zenith, never seen this. Beautiful, beautiful watches, beautiful collection. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having us.
So if you guys have an amazing collection like this, as you see, they're not Rolex, AP, Patek, what I know. If you guys have any watches you want to share with me, please come by the store and take this as an opportunity to come show me your collection and be on our channel. Thank you again, my friend. I appreciate it.
It was
Thank
a
you so
blast.
much. I
It was
hope you
a
enjoy your
blast.
time here in Miami.
Absolutely.